me ask you something. If you were laid off this year or in the last year, what was the story that you told yourself about what happened? I'm willing to bet that somewhere in that story, AI showed up. Maybe you told yourself that a machine can do your job cheaper. Maybe your manager said something about automation or efficiency. Maybe you just absorbed it from the headlines. And now it is in your head. I was replaced by a robot. I'm Dr. Anitra Manning, founder of Everyday Grief Incorporated, and I've spent 25 years in Fortune 500 HR leadership. I've sat on the teams that planned layoffs. I've delivered the news, and I've also been on the receiving end myself 5 times. Today, I want to challenge a narrative that I believe is doing real harm to real people. The narrative that AI is the reason you lost your job. Because when I looked at the data, actually looked at it, what I found was that most of what we've been attributing to AI is ironically artificial. This is the Everyday Grief podcast series on the occupational breakup. Let's slow down and get into it. Before we get into the data, I want to give you some context because we've sped up the AI conversation without really talking about how we got here. And the nuance matters. Artificial intelligence didn't just appear, it evolved from decades of research, starting all the way back in 1956 at the Dartmouth Conference, where researchers gathered and essentially said, what if machines could think? One of the most important figures in that early work was Herb Simon, a beloved researcher at my alma mater, Carnegie Mellon University, who built simulations of human problem solving. IBM, one of my former employers, was there too. They were providing the hardware, running the experiments, doing the early work of machine learning. In fact, they termed the thing machine learning, and they did a lot of the foundational work that would lead to where we are right now. But here's the thing, the dream of artificial beings go back much further than the 1950s. Mary Shelley actually wrote Frankenstein in 1818. And that's a story about creating something artificial and what it cost us. And in the 1920s, a Czech playwright named Karel Čapek actually invented the word robot in his play R.U.R. And Fritz Lang's Metropolis in 1927 gave us one of cinema's first humanoid robots. But the real shift happened right in our living rooms, and that's when we welcomed in Rosie the robot on the Jetsons in 1962. She made AI feel domestic, safe, and like family. Mr. Spock and the Enterprise computer on Star Trek made it aspirational. And then there's Star Wars that gave us R2D2 and C3PO, robots with personality, loyalty, and humor. People didn't just accept those characters, they loved them. And later, you remember in Star Trek The Next Generation, we had Data, an android who wanted to be human, which flipped the fear narrative into empathy. These stories did something no research paper could ever do. They made the idea of living alongside intelligent machines not just thinkable, but something that was quite desirable. They created the emotional infrastructure of acceptance. The imagination was able to scale way before technology did. So here we are, 2 centuries of imagination, decades of research, and now AI is real, it's here, and it's in the headlines every single day. But I want to ask you, just because AI is everywhere in the conversation, does that mean that it's everywhere in the workplace? And more importantly, is it really the reason people are losing their jobs? All right, let's get into what we actually know because this is where the narrative starts to fall apart. Now, according to the outplacement firm Challenger Gray and Christmas, AI has been cited as the reason for only 3 of job reduction plans since 2023. 3%. 3. Now, given all the media hype, you might assume that number will be much bigger. I did too. So I just kept on looking. And I saw a recently published study that was done in the Harvard Business Review. And it was a survey done by researchers at Deloitte and MIT that surveyed over 1,000 global executives in December of 2025. And what they found was that most leaders are still in the thinking stage when it comes to AI. They anticipate that AI will have an impact, but they can't fully demonstrate, they can't fully determine how it will change workflows or whether it's actually driving productivity gains. Here's what the study did find, though. Someone or somewhere between 21 and 39% of respondents said they had made some headcount reductions in anticipation of AI, not because of AI, but anticipation of it. 29% said they were hiring fewer people in anticipation of future AI capabilities. Only 2% of organizations reported making large reductions in force related to actual AI implementation. And 9% said they weren't even sure about the extent of or reason for their AI related headcount decisions. So, what we actually know is this: most of what we've been attributing to AI is based on anticipation, not implementation. It's truly artificial. We're blaming a technology that most companies haven't even fully integrated yet. And I've been on those teams. I've been in the rooms where workflows had to be reviewed for automation. I can tell you from experience, it is tedious, careful work. It requires interviews, observations, lots of observations, and metrics to determine if and how AI could actually change the flow of work across different job categories. It's a full project requiring HR job framework reviews, change management, and business process reengineering. It is a kind of work that cannot be done capriciously. This is not something you can announce in a press release one day and then execute within that same quarter. And here's another thing I want you to know. Some companies that announced layoffs have started to hire back or reconsider their reductions. You know why? Because AI is not a magic switch. When companies actually sit down and do the work, they often realize the integration is more complex and more nuanced than the headline suggested. So, if it's not AI, then what is it? What's actually driving the layoffs that we've been seeing? There are four primary reasons for workforce reductions right now. And just about every week, I'll walk through each of these during my occupational breakup online training. And they are simply this: there are general business cycles, there's a geopolitical climate and the changes that's coming out of that. There are also some policy related priorities that come with those geopolitical changes. There's market and economic conditions that are changing and contract losses. That last part, contract losses, in the most recent months, contract losses have been the single largest driver of job reductions. Some of this is also about correction. There are strong suggestions that companies overhired during the pandemic. The workplace may simply been in an adjustment season, jobs being right sized for the current reality and for the near future. And there are fears of a global recession that are driving some preemptive cuts. These are human decisions driven by human conditions, not robotic ones. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying AI has no impact. When companies do integrate AI intelligently into workflows, it can be genuinely transformative. People describe feeling like they have a partner. So they get into a flow, they're able to pick up work they previously outsourced, and they're able to get things done faster. So there's some real value that's coming out there. But there's also some cost to all this too. There's increased perceived capacity that can lead to expanding workloads without expanding rest. So people are actually going and going and going without any pause in the daily work. So researchers at Berkeley have started suggesting standardizing some AI practices within the workplace because of this. So introducing boundaries around how we integrate AI into our daily work so it doesn't consume us, doesn't create a cognitive overload. The point is this: we are still early in all of this. Very few researchers and leaders have AI figured out. The early adopting companies are few. We simply do not know enough to say that AI is the reason for mass layoffs. It sounds good in a headline, though, but the data doesn't support it. Now, here's why I care so much about this. And here's why I think we need to slow down and name what's happening. When we tell someone, or when they come to believe that they were replaced by a machine, we are making a statement about their dignity. We're saying, in effect, that their contribution, their creativity, their years of showing up and solving problems and building relationships, all of that can be replicated by something that does not bear the human spirit, something that does not have spiritual or moral judgment, something that cannot grieve, something that cannot love or care deeply. And when a person absorbs that particular story, that they are replaceable by something without a soul, it doesn't just affect their job search, it affects their sense of self. It affects their hope, their belief that they have something irreplaceable to offer. Now, in my work, which lives at the intersection of organizational psychology and theology, I have seen this up close. The person who was a director for 15 to 20 years just simply can't bring themselves to update their resume because they think, what's the point? The person who used to lead teams and now sits in silence because they have internalized the idea that a chatbot can do what they did. That brings such spiritual harm, and I want to see that corrected. And it's being caused not by AI itself, but by a false narrative about AI. So I want to say this directly to anyone listening who has been carrying that story. You were not replaced by a robot. You were caught in a very human situation, a business cycle, a contract loss, a market correction, a leadership decision. And that is painful. And I will never minimize that particular pain, but it is a different kind of pain than obsolescence, and it deserves a different kind of healing. So, what do we do with this? If it is not AI, if it's a human thing, what does that open up for you? First, I want you to join me in taking a very deep breath in this moment. Breathe. It was a human situation, not a robotic one. And so, therefore, you have a reason to hope. Naming AI as the reason makes everything so much harder. It produces a different kind of hope dwindling that is very difficult to come back from. But if you can look at your layoff through a human lens, the path forward starts to clear. And what becomes possible is that you begin to address this for the layoff that it really was. And as I prefer to frame it, as a breakup, because that is what it was. You were in a relationship with that role, that team, that identity of yourself. And now it's over. And like any breakup, you need to do the work before you move on. That means unpacking, it means debriefing, it means ritualizing the work that was so that you can release it and heal. It means playing back the video of who you were in that job and asking yourself, is that the person I remain committed to being? Or is there a new version of me that is ready to be released? For HR leaders, if you're listening, this matters for your people too. If you're telling your workforce, or if anybody in your team is telling them that AI is the reason for reductions, and when the data says otherwise, you're adding a layer of existential harm on top of an already painful transition. And your people deserve an honest narrative. And honestly, so does your culture. You do know that the people who stay at your organization are watching how you treat the people who leave. I'm going to leave you with this. AI is a remarkable technology. It is changing how we work, and it will continue to. But it's not everything, and it is not everywhere, not yet. And it is not the reason most people lost their jobs this year. The data is clear about that. What's also clear is that the story we tell ourselves about why we were let go shapes how we heal. And if that story is false, if it's built on a hype instead of data, then our healing gets built on a cracked foundation. And you deserve better than that. You deserve to grieve what actually happened so you can actually move forward. Now, if you want to go deeper into this work and to really acknowledging what's the human element of what's going on, I want to invite you to join me this week, every Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. I do the occupational breakup online training, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I walk through the real reasons behind workforce transitions. And I give you tools to unpack, to debrief, and heal from your layoff so that you can re enter the marketplace with clarity and confidence, not fear. The link is in the show notes. And if you're an HR leader or an executive thinking about how your organization manages transitions, I'd really love to talk with you about what a culture protecting layoff might look like in practice. You can always find me at everydaygriefcoach.com. You can email me at anitra@everydaygriefcoach.com. I want everyone to remember you were not replaced by a machine. You're simply navigating a very human moment, and it's not that simple. But I want you to know that you don't have to do it alone. I'm Dr. Anitra Manning. This has been the Everyday Grief Podcast. You've joined me for the Occupational Breakup Series, and I'll see you next week. Be well.